Lady Eleanor Whitmore stood at her window as the sun rose over the English countryside, watching carriages filled with young maidens stream through the gates of Ravenshollow Castle. At 40 years old and childless after 2 failed marriages, she should not have been among them. Yet here she was, summoned, like all the others, to meet the young Earl of Ravenshollow, who must choose a bride before his 25th birthday or lose his inheritance forever. The irony cut deep. While girls barely out of the schoolroom primped and giggled in the halls below, Eleanor knew she had no chance. She had come only because her brother insisted, claiming the Earl had specifically requested her presence. A cruel jest, surely. What could a man of 24 want with a barren woman whose childbearing years were nearly spent? Eleanor turned from the window and smoothed her simple blue dress. Unlike the elaborate gowns the other ladies wore, hers was practical and understated. She had learned long ago not to draw attention to herself. 2 husbands had taught her that lesson well. The first had died in a hunting accident after 3 years of marriage, produced no heir. The second had grown cold and distant when she failed to quicken with child, eventually taking a mistress who bore him the son Eleanor could not give. When he died of fever 2 years past, Eleanor thought herself done with marriage forever. "My lady, the Earl requests your presence in the library," said her maid Sarah, appearing at the door with flushed cheeks. "He wishes to speak with you privately." Eleanor's heart skipped despite herself. "Now, but the formal presentations are not until this evening." He was most insistent. "My lady said he had been hoping to meet you since you arrived yesterday." Eleanor followed Sarah through the winding corridors of Ravenshollow Castle, her mind racing. The ancient stones seemed to whisper secrets as they passed, and she wondered what game the young Earl played. Perhaps he meant to dismiss her early, to spare them both the embarrassment of including a woman of her age in the evening's festivities. It would be a kindness, though it would sting. She found him standing before the great fireplace in the library, his back to the door. William Ashford. The Earl of Ravenshollow was taller than she had expected, with broad shoulders that filled his dark blue coat. His hair was the color of autumn leaves, and when he turned to face her, his green eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lady Whitmore," he said, moving toward her with long, confident strides, "thank you for coming. Please, sit with me." He gestured to 2 chairs near the fire, and Eleanor noticed his hands were strong and graceful. She settled into the offered seat, acutely aware of how he watched her every movement. "You must think me mad," William said, settling across from her. "Summoning a house full of marriageable ladies like some fairy tale prince, choosing from a parade of beauties. It is your right as Earl," Eleanor replied carefully, "and your duty to secure the line." "Duty." He spoke the word as if it tasted bitter. "Yes, I am well acquainted with duty, my lady. My father's will ensures I cannot forget it. Marry before my 25th birthday, which arrives in just 6 weeks, or lose everything to my cousin Marcus, the estate, the title, the livelihood of hundreds of families who depend on these lands." Eleanor studied his face, seeing the weight he carried. "It is a heavy burden for one so young." "Young?" William laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everyone calls me young. Yet I have managed these estates since I was 20 when my father fell ill. I have sat in Parliament, negotiated trade agreements, and settled disputes that could have led to violence. But because I am 24 and unmarried, the world sees me as a boy playing at being a man. Perhaps because most men your age have not faced such responsibilities," Eleanor said gently. "Your father was wise to trust you with so much." William's eyes softened. "You speak as one who understands burden, Lady Whitmore. Tell me, what brought you to accept my invitation? Surely not the hope of becoming a young Earl's bride." Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. My brother insisted I come. He said you had specifically requested my presence, though I cannot imagine why. Can you not? William leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. Eleanor Whitmore, daughter of the Duke of Bramwell, widow of Lord Ashworth and Lord Pennington. They say you ran your first husband's estates with wisdom beyond your years when he grew ill. They say you turned a failing property into one of the most prosperous in Yorkshire. They say you have a mind for business that rivals any man's, and a heart that has never forgotten the common people who work the land. Eleanor stared at him. You have been asking questions about me. I have been asking questions about all the ladies my mother and her advisers suggested, but you, Lady Whitmore, are the only one whose answers intrigued me enough to request a private meeting. I fear you will be disappointed, my lord. I am 40 years old, well past the age for childbearing. Any man who marries me does so knowing he may never have an heir of his body, and any woman who marries me does so knowing she may become a pauper in 6 weeks if we cannot make the match work. William stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens where young women strolled in the morning sun. Look at them, Lady Whitmore, beautiful, young, fertile. Any one of them could give me sons and secure my line. Yet when I look at them, I see children playing at being women. They giggle behind their fans and speak of nothing but ribbons and balls. How could such a wife help me manage vast estates? How could she understand the weight of responsibility I carry? Eleanor rose and joined him at the window. You speak as if marriage must be a business arrangement. Must it not be for men like me? I have no time for romantic foolishness. I need a partner, not a pretty ornament. Someone who understands duty and sacrifice. Someone who can stand beside me as an equal, not cower behind me like a frightened child. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the young ladies below. Eleanor felt something stir in her chest, a warmth she had thought long dead. This was not the callow youth she had expected, but a man aged beyond his years by responsibility and burden. What of love, my lord? She asked quietly. Do you not hope to find affection with your bride? William turned to face her, and she was struck again by the intensity in his green eyes. I had hoped to find respect, Lady Whitmore, understanding, perhaps even friendship. But love, he shook his head. Love is a luxury I cannot afford, not when failure means the ruin of so many. A marriage without love is a cold thing, Eleanor said, thinking of her own experiences. I have had 2 such unions. They leave scars on the soul. Yet you survived them, grew stronger, perhaps. The girls below would shatter under such trials. Eleanor looked at him sharply. You think suffering makes one a better wife? I think surviving suffering makes one capable of facing whatever comes. Marriage to me will not be easy. Lady Whitmore, I work from dawn until midnight most days. I travel frequently to tend to business in London and other holdings. My wife will need to manage much in my absence. She will face criticism from those who think her too old, too independent, too involved in matters that should concern only men. Could you bear such challenges? The question hung between them like a bridge Eleanor was not sure she dared cross. Why do you ask me this, my lord? Surely you do not seriously consider me as a candidate. I consider you the only serious candidate, William said firmly. The others are lovely children who would make suitable wives for men who want ornamental brides. But I need more than that, Eleanor. May I call you Eleanor? Her name on his lips sent an unexpected thrill through her. If you wish. I need a woman who has faced hardship and emerged stronger. A woman who understands that marriage is partnership, not ownership. A woman who can help me bear the weight of duty without crumbling beneath it. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his green eyes. "I need you, Eleanor." The words hit her like a physical blow. When had anyone ever said they needed her? Her first husband had married her for her dowry and family connections. Her second had seen her as a broodmare who failed in her primary function. But this young man, this Earl who could have anyone, spoke of needing her mind, her strength, her partnership. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I know you saved your first husband's estate when he fell ill. I know you negotiated favorable terms with creditors that other men would have fled from. I know you personally visited every tenant family during the harsh winter 3 years past, bringing food and medicine from your own supplies. I know you refused your second husband's demands, that you dismiss long-time servants to cut costs, finding other ways to balance the household accounts. These are not the actions of a weak or foolish woman." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "How do you know such things?" "I made it my business to know. When my mother presented me with a list of eligible ladies, I had my steward make discreet inquiries about each one. The reports about you were remarkable. Your tenants speak of you with genuine affection. Your servants are loyal in a way that cannot be bought. Your business associates respect your judgment. You are spoken of as a woman of honor and intelligence who has never forgotten her humanity despite the trials you have faced." "And my failures? Did your inquiries reveal those as well?" William's expression grew gentle. "Your inability to bear children is not a failure, Eleanor. It is a sorrow, perhaps, but not a failure. And if it troubles you to hear it said, know that I have considered this carefully. Yes, I need an heir, but there are other ways to secure the succession if we cannot have children of our body. I have cousins who could inherit, or we might adopt. The primary need is a wife who can help me manage what I have now, not necessarily one who can extend the line." Eleanor turned away, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words, and her own reaction to them. "This is madness. You have a castle full of beautiful young women any man would be proud to call wife. Why would you choose a barren widow of 40? Because you are the only woman here who has proven she can be a true partner." William moved behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Because when I imagine the years ahead, the long days and difficult decisions, the political battles and family responsibilities, I cannot picture myself facing them with a child bride who would rather discuss the latest fashions than the harvest reports. But I can picture facing them with you." Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting against the hope that bloomed in her chest. "And what of the gossips who will say you chose poorly? What of those who will whisper that you married an old woman out of desperation? Let them whisper. Those whose opinions matter will see the wisdom in my choice soon enough. And what of your own heart, William? What of companionship and affection? Do you truly believe those things can grow between us?" He was quiet for so long that Eleanor began to think he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and thoughtful. "I believe they already have begun to grow, at least on my part. From the moment you entered this room, I have felt more at ease than I have in months. When you speak, I find myself listening not just to your words, but to the wisdom behind them. When you look at me, I do not see pity for my youth or calculation for my title. I see understanding. Is that not the beginning of affection?" Eleanor turned to face him, struck by the sincerity in his expression. "You truly mean this? You would choose me over all those young beauties?" "I would choose you over 1,000 maidens," William said firmly. "The question is whether you would choose me. I know I am young by your standards. I know marriage to me would bring challenges and scrutiny. I know I am asking you to risk your heart again after it has already been broken. But Eleanor, I am asking you to consider it. Will you?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Eleanor looked into William's earnest face and saw not the untested youth she had expected, but a man who had already faced more responsibility than most would in a lifetime. A man who valued her mind as much as any physical beauty. A man who spoke of partnership and respect with a conviction that made her chest tight with longing. "I need time to think," she said finally. William nodded. "Of course. But know that I will not be conducting formal courtships with the other ladies while you consider you are my choice, Eleanor. I will wait for your answer. And if I refuse," pain flickered across his features, "then I will accept that and find another path. But I hope with all my heart that you will not refuse." Eleanor felt her resolve wavering under the intensity of his gaze. "This is not how these things are supposed to happen. You are supposed to court the young ladies, dance with them at balls, woo them with poetry and flowers. I am supposed to do many things according to society's expectations," William said with a slight smile. "But I have learned that what is expected and what is wise are often very different things. Society expects me to marry a young virgin who will bear me many sons and never voice an opinion about anything more serious than the dinner menu. Wisdom tells me to marry a woman who can stand as my equal and help me build something lasting. Society will be unkind to us both if we make this match. Society is unkind to anyone who dares to be different, but I would rather face their unkindness with you beside me than their approval with someone who cannot truly understand me." Eleanor looked out the window again at the young women strolling the gardens. They seemed so carefree, so untouched by the harsh realities that had shaped her own life. Once she had been like them, full of dreams and expectations about love and marriage. 2 husbands had taught her that fairy tales rarely came true. But perhaps, she thought, looking at William's earnest face, there were different kinds of fairy tales. Perhaps the story of a 40-year-old widow finding unexpected love with a young Earl who valued her mind above all else was its own kind of magic. "I will give you my answer by tomorrow evening," she said. William's face lit up with hope. "That is all I can ask." As Eleanor left the library, her mind whirled with possibilities and fears. She made her way back to her chambers, grateful to avoid the common areas where the other ladies gathered. She needed solitude to think through William's extraordinary proposal. Sarah was waiting in her room, eyes bright with curiosity. "How did it go, my lady? What did the Earl want?" "To ask me to marry him," Eleanor said, sinking into a chair by the window. Sarah's mouth fell open. "Marry you? But my lady, there are so many younger ladies here. Beautiful girls from the finest families." "Yes, I am aware of that, Sarah." Eleanor rubbed her temples where a headache was beginning to form. "He says he needs a partner, not an ornament. Someone who can help him manage his responsibilities." "Well," Sarah said slowly, "that does make sense, I suppose. You did manage Lord Ashworth's estates better than he ever did, and you turned Lord Pennington's failing properties around completely. But my lady, he is so young, and you are 40 and barren." "Yes, I know what I am, Sarah." Sarah flushed. "I did not mean to imply anything wrong with your age, my lady, only that it is unusual for such matches to be made. What will people say?" "They will say many things, I am sure. The question is whether I care enough about their opinions to let them govern my choices." Eleanor spent the rest of the day walking the castle grounds, thinking through every aspect of William's proposal. The rational part of her mind catalogued all the reasons it was a poor idea. The difference in their ages, the gossip they would face, the possibility that he might come to resent her if she could not give him children, the risk of opening her heart again only to have it broken a 3rd time. But another part of her, a part she had thought dead and buried, whispered of possibilities she had never dared dream. A marriage based on mutual respect and understanding rather than duty and economics. A partner who valued her thoughts and opinions. A man who looked at her and saw strength rather than failure. That evening, Eleanor kept to her room while the other ladies attended a grand dinner in the great hall. She could hear music and laughter drifting up from below, and she imagined William making polite conversation with young women who probably bored him senseless. The thought brought an unexpected smile to her lips. The next morning brought a soft knock at her door. Sarah answered it and returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "From the Earl, my lady." He said there was no need to reply unless you wished to. Inside the paper, Eleanor found a slim volume of poetry and a brief note written in William's strong hand. "I thought you might enjoy these verses. They remind me of our conversation yesterday." The author writes of finding unexpected beauty in the most unlikely places. Eleanor opened the book and found it filled with poems about love and partnership, about the beauty of maturity and wisdom, about finding joy in unexpected moments. Several passages were marked with small pencil lines, and she realized William had chosen each one carefully. Her heart warmed as she read verses that spoke of love that grew slowly and deeply, rooted in respect and understanding rather than mere passion. She was still reading when another knock came at the door. This time, it was not Sarah who answered, but Eleanor herself, expecting perhaps another message from William. Instead, she found herself face to face with Lady Catherine Pemberton, one of the youngest and most beautiful of the assembled ladies. "Lady Whitmore," Catherine said with a sweet smile that did not reach her eyes, "I hope you do not mind the intrusion. I was hoping we might have a private word." Eleanor stepped aside to let the young woman enter, curious about what could have brought one of her supposed rivals to her door. Catherine was indeed lovely, with golden hair and blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She was perhaps 20 years old, with the kind of fresh beauty that made men write poetry. Eleanor could not imagine what such a girl could want with her. "I understand the Earl paid you a private visit yesterday," Catherine said without preamble. "The other ladies are quite curious about what was discussed." "I am sure they are," Eleanor replied carefully, "but I fear private conversations must remain private." Catherine's smile grew sharper. "Of course, but Lady Whitmore, I hope you will not take offense if I speak plainly. We both know why you were invited here, and it was not because anyone seriously expects the Earl to choose you as his bride." Eleanor felt her spine stiffen. "I am afraid I do not take your meaning, Lady Catherine. Come now, we need not pretend. You are here to make the rest of us look more desirable by comparison. A 40-year-old widow among girls of 20 makes us seem all the more youthful and fertile. It is a clever strategy, really, though perhaps a bit cruel to you." The words hit Eleanor like physical blows, but she kept her expression calm. "That is an interesting theory, Lady Catherine. Have you any proof of it?" "Proof? What proof is needed beyond common sense? The Earl is 24 years old, handsome, wealthy, and titled. He could have any woman he desires. Why would he choose someone old enough to be his mother when he could have a young wife who could give him many sons?" Eleanor felt her newfound hope crumble under the weight of Catherine's logic. The girl was saying nothing Eleanor had not thought herself, but hearing it spoken so bluntly made her realize how foolish she had been to believe William's pretty words.
"You may be right," Eleanor said quietly.
Catherine's expression softened slightly, as if she sensed victory. "I do not say this to be cruel. Lady Whitmore, I am sure you are a lovely person, and in other circumstances I would be honored to know you. But we must be realistic about these things. The Earl needs a young wife who can secure his succession. Surely you can see that." After Catherine left, Eleanor sat staring at the book of poetry William had sent. The marked passages that had seemed so meaningful an hour ago now felt like mockery. What had she been thinking? That a handsome young Earl would truly want her when he could have his pick of beautiful young women. She thought of the way William had looked at her, the sincerity in his voice when he spoke of needing her. But Catherine was right. Men said many things when they wanted something from women. Perhaps William thought to flatter her into accepting some lesser arrangement. Perhaps he hoped she would be so grateful for any attention from a young man that she would agree to be his mistress while he married someone suitable. The thought made her feel sick. She had been a fool to believe, even for a moment, that someone like William could truly want someone like her. Eleanor spent the day in her room, pleading a headache when Sarah suggested she join the other ladies for various activities. She could not bear to see them all together, young and beautiful and full of hope, knowing that one of them would soon be William's bride while she returned home to her lonely widowhood. As evening approached, Sarah entered with a worried expression. "My lady, the Earl has requested that all the ladies gather in the great hall at 8 o'clock. He says he has an announcement to make." Eleanor's heart sank. So it was to be done publicly. William would announce his engagement to one of the young beauties, and Eleanor would have to smile and offer congratulations, while her heart broke all over again. "Help me dress, Sarah. Something simple and dark. I do not wish to call attention to myself." Sarah helped her into a deep green gown that was elegant but understated. Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror and saw exactly what Catherine had described. A woman old enough to be the Earl's mother, foolish enough to have believed his flattery. The great hall was blazing with candlelight when Eleanor entered. The young ladies were arranged around the room like flowers in a garden, their bright gowns and jewels catching the light. Eleanor found a place near the back, hoping to remain unnoticed. William entered, looking magnificent in formal evening wear, his auburn hair gleaming in the candlelight. Eleanor's heart clenched at the sight of him, and she cursed herself for the weakness. "Ladies," William began, his voice carrying easily through the large room, "I thank you all for accepting my invitation to Ravenshollow Castle. It has been my honor to meet each of you over these past days." He paused, his eyes scanning the room. When his gaze found Eleanor in the back, he smiled, and she felt her heart skip despite her resolve to remain detached. "When my father's will required that I marry before my 25th birthday, I confess I approached the task with some trepidation. Marriage is a serious matter, not to be entered into lightly. I knew I needed a wife who could be more than merely decorative, someone who could stand beside me as I faced the challenges of managing vast estates and caring for the many people who depend upon these lands." Several of the young ladies smiled and preened, clearly believing they were about to be chosen. "I have had the privilege of speaking with many of you, and I have been impressed by your beauty, your accomplishments, and your fine characters. Any man would be fortunate to call one of you his wife." Eleanor felt her stomach twist. Here it came, the polite rejection followed by the announcement of his choice. However, William continued, and something in his tone made the room fall completely silent. "I have found that my heart has been captured not by youth or conventional beauty, but by something far rarer and more precious. I have found myself drawn to wisdom earned through experience, to strength forged in adversity, to a kind of beauty that deepens rather than fades with time." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. He could not possibly mean what she thought he meant. William stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Lady Eleanor Whitmore, would you do me the honor of joining me?" The room erupted in whispers as Eleanor froze in shock. Every eye in the hall turned to her, and she felt heat flood her cheeks. Slowly, on trembling legs, she made her way through the crowd of staring faces to where William waited. He took her hand when she reached him, his touch warm and steady. "Ladies," he said, addressing the room, but keeping his eyes on Eleanor's face, "I am honored to announce my engagement to Lady Eleanor Whitmore. She has agreed to become my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor could feel the shock and outrage radiating from the assembled young women, could practically hear their thoughts. How could he choose her over any of them? "I know some of you may be surprised by my choice," William continued, his voice calm and confident, "but I have not made it lightly. Lady Eleanor possesses the qualities I value most in a partner: intelligence, experience, integrity, and the kind of strength that can only come from facing life's challenges with grace. I am a fortunate man indeed to have won her acceptance." Lady Catherine stepped forward, her face pale with shock and anger. "My lord, surely you jest. Lady Whitmore is old enough to be your mother. How can you choose her over ladies who could give you heirs and enhance your family's standing?" A murmur of agreement swept through the room, and Eleanor felt herself shrinking under the collective disapproval. She started to pull her hand free from William's, but he tightened his grip gently. "Lady Catherine," William said coolly, "I appreciate your concern, but I am quite capable of making my own decisions about marriage. As for heirs, there are many ways to secure a succession beyond bearing children. What cannot be easily replaced is a true partner, someone who understands both the privileges and burdens of our position." "But the gossip," protested another young lady. "What will society say about such an unusual match?" "Society will say many things, as it always does," William replied with a slight smile. "But those whose opinions matter to me will recognize the wisdom of choosing substance over superficiality, experience over inexperience, proven worth over mere potential." Eleanor found her voice at last. "William, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any public announcements." He turned to her with such tenderness in his expression that her heart skipped. "Eleanor, my dear, we discussed this yesterday, and you promised me an answer by tonight. Unless you mean to refuse me in front of everyone, I take your presence here as acceptance." Eleanor looked around the room at all the young, beautiful faces, staring at her with mixtures of shock, envy, and disdain. She thought of Catherine's words earlier, of all the reasons this match made no sense, of all the ways it could go wrong. But then she looked at William's face, at the hope and affection she saw there, and she remembered how he had spoken to her yesterday, not as a consolation prize or a convenient arrangement, but as a true partner he genuinely wanted beside him. "Yes," she said softly, then louder so the whole room could hear. "Yes, William, I accept your proposal." The room erupted in excited chatter, some shocked, some scandalized, some genuinely pleased. William raised their joined hands and brought hers to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth shooting through her entire body. "Thank you," he whispered, meant only for her ears. "You have made me the happiest of men." As the evening continued with congratulations and barely concealed gossip, Eleanor found herself swept along in a whirlwind of activity. Wedding plans needed to be made quickly, given William's approaching birthday deadline. Guests began departing the next morning, some offering sincere good wishes, others clearly disapproving of the unusual match. Lady Catherine approached Eleanor as she was preparing to leave. "I hope you know what you are doing, Lady Whitmore. Marriage to such a young man will not be easy. He may come to resent you when he realizes what he has given up." Eleanor met the girl's gaze steadily. "And he may not. Only time will tell, Lady Catherine. But I would rather risk my heart on something real than spend my life wondering what might have been." After the last of the guests departed, Eleanor found herself alone with William in the same library where he had first proposed. The castle felt strangely quiet after all the activity. "Do you regret it?" William asked, settling beside her near the fire. Accepting me, I mean. I know today was difficult. Facing all their disapproval. Eleanor considered the question seriously. I would be lying if I said I was not frightened. This is not what anyone expected, least of all me. But no, I do not regret it. What frightens me more than their disapproval is the possibility that you might come to regret your choice. Never, William said firmly. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. Eleanor, I need you to understand something. I did not choose you because I could not have someone else. I chose you because you are who I want, not as a substitute or a compromise, but as my first and only choice. But I am so much older than you, and I cannot give you children. You are 8 years older than me. Hardly an insurmountable gap. And as for children, we have discussed this. There are other considerations more important to me than blood heirs. Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his young and strong, hers showing the first signs of age. I have been married twice before, William. I know how these arrangements can sour when reality sets in. What happens when you tire of my company, when you wish you had chosen someone young and beautiful who could give you sons? William was quiet for a long moment, and Eleanor's heart sank, thinking she had voiced his own secret doubts. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than uncertain. Eleanor, may I tell you something about my parents' marriage? She nodded, curious about this change of subject. My father married my mother when she was 18, and he was 35. Everyone said it was a perfect match. She was beautiful and young. He was established and titled. They had me within the first year, and everyone expected them to be blissfully happy. William stared into the fire, his expression growing sad. But they were miserable together. My mother was too young to understand the responsibilities that came with being a countess. She wanted parties and shopping trips, while my father needed a partner who could help manage the estates. They grew to resent each other. She felt he was too serious and demanding. He felt she was frivolous and useless. By the time I was 10, they barely spoke to each other. Eleanor squeezed his hand gently. I am sorry. That must have been difficult for you to witness. It taught me something important about marriage. All the things society says matter, youth, beauty, social standing, mean nothing if the people involved cannot truly understand and support each other. My parents looked perfect together, but they were fundamentally incompatible. He turned to face her fully. When I look at you, Eleanor, I see someone who understands the weight of responsibility, someone who has managed estates and cared for tenants and made difficult decisions. Someone who could stand beside me as we face whatever challenges come, not someone who would wilt at the first sign of difficulty. And when I look at you, Eleanor said softly, I see a man who values substance over surface, someone mature enough to know his own mind despite his youth. Someone who has already proven his character through his actions. William smiled, the expression transforming his face. Then we understand each other. That is more than many married couples can claim. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle in the grate. Eleanor felt something she had not experienced in years, peace, not the resigned acceptance that had characterized her previous marriages, but a genuine sense of rightness about the path she had chosen. When shall we marry? She asked. As soon as arrangements can be made. We have less than 5 weeks before my birthday, and I would prefer to have some time as husband and wife before that deadline passes. Eleanor nodded. A small ceremony, I think. Given the circumstances, it would be better to avoid too much fanfare. If that is what you prefer, though I want you to know, Eleanor, I am not ashamed of our match. If you would like a grand wedding, we shall have one. She was touched by the offer, but shook her head. I have had grand weddings. William, What I want now is a marriage that matters, not a ceremony that impresses people who will gossip about us regardless. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Eleanor's brother, the Duke of Bramwell, arrived at Ravenshollow to give his blessing and walk her down the aisle. He was initially skeptical of the match, but came around quickly after speaking with William privately. "He is a good man, Eleanor," he told her the night before the wedding. "Young, yes, but with an old soul. He speaks of you with genuine affection and respect. I believe you have chosen well this time." The wedding itself was simple but elegant, held in the castle's ancient chapel with only close family and friends in attendance. Eleanor wore a gown of deep rose silk that flattered her colouring, and William looked handsome in his formal coat. When they exchanged vows, Eleanor was struck by the sincerity in William's voice as he promised to love and cherish her for all the days of his life. The words felt different this time. Not the hollow recitation she remembered from her previous weddings, but something real and meaningful. When William kissed her to seal their union, Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness of it. The small reception afterward was warm and intimate. Eleanor found herself actually enjoying the celebration instead of enduring it, laughing at William's stories and feeling genuinely happy for perhaps the first time in years. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Eleanor found herself nervous about what came next. Her previous wedding nights had been awkward affairs, dutiful couplings with men who saw her primarily as a vessel for their heirs. She did not know what to expect from William, who had married her for such different reasons. William seemed to sense her apprehension as they made their way to the master chambers that would now be theirs to share. "Eleanor," he said gently, pausing outside the door, "I want you to know that there is no pressure tonight, or any night, for anything you are not ready for. Our marriage is not solely about producing heirs. It is about partnership and companionship first." Eleanor looked up at him, struck again by his maturity and consideration. "Thank you for saying that, but William, I am not afraid of the physical aspects of marriage. What concerns me is whether we can truly build the kind of partnership you speak of." William smiled and took her hands in his. "We have already begun building it, have we not? These past weeks, planning the wedding and discussing how we want to manage the estates together, have felt like the most natural thing in the world to me." Eleanor realized he was right. They had fallen into an easy rhythm of consultation and shared decision-making that felt completely natural. "Yes," she said, returning his smile. "I suppose we have." Their wedding night was a revelation to Eleanor. William approached her with a patience and gentleness she had never experienced before, taking time to learn what pleased her, never rushing or demanding. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Afterward, as they lay together in the big four-poster bed, William traced lazy patterns on Eleanor's bare shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Eleanor considered the question. Was she happy? When had she last even asked herself such a thing? "Yes," she said, surprised by how easily the word came. "I am happy, William, truly happy perhaps for the first time in my adult life." William pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Good. That is all I want, to make you happy and to build something lasting together." The next morning brought their first real test as a married couple. William's steward arrived early with news that one of the tenant farms had suffered significant flood damage during the night's storm. Crops were ruined, livestock lost, and the family was facing potential ruin. Eleanor dressed quickly and joined William in his study as he reviewed the damage reports. Without being asked, she began calculating what resources could be diverted to help the affected family, drawing on her experience managing similar crises on her previous husband's estates. "If we provide grain from the castle stores and lumber from the north woods, They could rebuild and replant, she suggested. The cost would be significant, but not ruinous to the estate as a whole. William looked up from the papers, his face brightening. That is exactly what I was thinking. But I wanted to hear your assessment first. Your experience with these matters is far greater than mine. Working together, they developed a comprehensive plan to help the Tennant family recover from their losses. Eleanor found herself energized by the process in a way she had never been during her previous marriages, when she had been expected to remain silent while the men made all decisions. As they rode out together to inspect the damage and speak with the affected family, Eleanor realized this was what William had meant about partnership. He valued her input and expertise, treating her as an equal rather than a decorative appendage. The next few weeks established a pattern that would define their marriage. Each morning, they would meet in William's study to review estate business together. Eleanor's experience with agricultural management and tenant relations proved invaluable, while William's knowledge of the political and financial aspects of their holdings complemented her skills perfectly. They discovered they worked together with an ease that surprised them both. Where Eleanor was cautious and detail-oriented, William was bold and visionary. Where he sometimes moved too quickly, she provided the steady counsel that kept him grounded. Their different strengths seemed to mesh perfectly. The tenants and servants quickly accepted Eleanor's involvement in estate management, having heard stories of her success with her previous husband's properties. More importantly, they saw that the Earl listened to his wife's advice and that her suggestions consistently led to improvements in their lives. 1 month after their wedding, William's 25th birthday arrived with little fanfare. They celebrated quietly with a small dinner party, but the real celebration was the knowledge that the marriage had accomplished its primary purpose. William's inheritance was secure. That night, as they prepared for bed, Eleanor reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked William, as he helped her out of her evening gown. "Marrying me instead of one of those young beauties who wanted to be your countess?" William's hands stilled on the buttons of her dress. "Eleanor, how can you ask me that? These past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Why would I regret the best decision I have ever made? Because you are still young, and someday you might wish you had chosen differently. Because I cannot give you children. Because people still whisper about us when they think we cannot hear." William turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face gently. "Do you know what I heard in church last Sunday? Mrs. Henderson thanking God that the Earl had finally found a wife who understood the needs of common folk. Do you know what my solicitor said yesterday? That the estate's financial position has improved more in the past month than it had in the previous year, thanks to your management suggestions." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Do you know what I think every morning when I wake up beside you? That I am the luckiest man in England, because I have a wife who is not only beautiful and wise, but who truly understands me and shares my goals." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "You truly mean that? I have never meant anything more in my life." "Eleanor, you have to stop expecting me to regret our marriage. I will not wake up one day and suddenly wish I had married a girl young enough to be my sister. I chose you not as a compromise, but as my heart's desire." That night, as Eleanor lay in William's arms listening to his steady breathing, she finally allowed herself to believe that this marriage might truly be different from her previous ones. For the first time in her adult life, she felt valued, not just for what she could provide to a man, but for who she was as a person. The next morning brought news that would test their new happiness. A messenger arrived with word that William's cousin Marcus, who would have inherited if William had not married, was contesting the will on the grounds that William's marriage to Eleanor was invalid due to their age difference. Eleanor felt her stomach drop as William read the legal documents. Can he do this? She asked. William's jaw tightened with anger. He can try. The claim is ridiculous. There is nothing in English law that prevents a man from marrying an older woman. But it will require legal action to resolve, and in the meantime, it casts doubt on the legitimacy of our union. Eleanor sank into a chair, feeling the weight of old fears settling on her shoulders. This is my fault. If you had married someone suitable, someone young, this would never have happened. This is not your fault, William said firmly, moving to kneel beside her chair. This is Marcus being a greedy fool who cannot accept that his gambling debts will not be resolved by inheriting an earldom. But Eleanor could see the worry in William's eyes, even as he tried to reassure her. What if the courts decided their marriage was somehow improper? What if William lost everything because he had chosen her? The next weeks were difficult as they waited for the legal challenge to work its way through the courts. Eleanor found herself second-guessing every decision, wondering if her very presence was putting William's inheritance at risk. The gossips, who had begun to quiet down, seized on the news with renewed enthusiasm. Eleanor began withdrawing from public activities, afraid that her visibility would somehow make things worse for William. She stopped attending social functions and began spending more time alone, despite William's protests. Eleanor, you cannot hide from this, William said one evening after she declined to accompany him to a dinner party. We have done nothing wrong. Our marriage is legal and valid, and we will not live as if we are ashamed of it. But what if the courts rule against us? What if you lose everything because of me? William sat beside her on the small sofa in their private sitting room, taking her hands in his. Then we will face whatever comes together. Eleanor, do you think I would trade what we have built together for all the estates in England? Do you think I would choose a cold, loveless marriage with someone suitable over the happiness I have found with you? You say that now, but what if we truly lose everything? What if we are left with nothing but each other? William smiled, the expression so warm and loving that Eleanor felt her heart skip. Then we will have everything that matters. Eleanor, these estates, this title, they are responsibilities I was born to, not the sum total of who I am, but you, our marriage. What we have built together, that is something I chose. That is something I would fight for with my last breath. His words moved her deeply, but Eleanor could not shake her fears. She had seen too many marriages destroyed by financial pressures, too many men who grew to resent wives who could not provide what they needed. The resolution came sooner than expected. Marcus's challenge was thrown out of court when it was revealed that he had forged some of the documents supporting his claim. Not only was William's inheritance secure, but Marcus faced criminal charges for his attempted fraud. Eleanor felt profound relief, but also something like shame. She had spent weeks doubting William's commitment to their marriage, expecting him to regret his choice under pressure. But he had never wavered, never suggested that he would be better off with someone else. I owe you an apology, she told him the night they received news of their victory. I should have trusted you, trusted us, instead of letting fear make me doubt what we have. William pulled her close, holding her against his chest. You have nothing to apologize for, my love. You have been hurt before by men who made promises they did not keep. It is natural that you would be cautious about trusting again. But you have never given me reason to doubt you. From the very beginning, you have been exactly what you said you would be, a true partner. And you have been everything I dreamed of and more, William replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. Eleanor, I need you to understand something. I did not marry you hoping you would become someone else. I married you because of who you are, a strong, intelligent, compassionate woman who has faced adversity with grace. Those qualities do not disappear under pressure, they grow stronger. That night, As they made love with a passion and tenderness that left Eleanor breathless, she finally let go of the last of her fears about their marriage. This was real. This was lasting. This was the love she had never dared hope she might find. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came news that Eleanor had not expected. She was with child. She discovered it first as a faint nausea in the mornings, then as a missed course, and finally as a subtle fullness in her breasts that she remembered from years past when she had hoped in vain for children with her previous husbands. Eleanor stared at herself in the mirror, hardly daring to believe what her body was telling her. At 41, she had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. Her previous marriages had produced no children despite years of trying, and she had accepted that motherhood was not to be her fate. But there was no denying the signs. She was definitely with child. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. What if she lost the baby, as she had lost 2 early pregnancies during her second marriage? What if her age made the pregnancy dangerous? What if something went wrong? But beneath the fear was a joy so profound it took her breath away. She and William would have a child together. Their love would create new life. Eleanor waited until she was absolutely certain before telling William. She chose a quiet evening when they were alone in their sitting room, he reading estate reports and she working on embroidery. "William," she said softly, setting down her needle, "I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him look up immediately, giving her his full attention. "What is it, my love?" Eleanor felt her heart racing as she searched for the right words. "I am with child." The papers in William's hands fluttered to the floor as he stared at her in shock. Truly, I am perhaps 2 months along." William was across the room in an instant, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around with a whoop of joy that made Eleanor laugh despite her nervousness. "Eleanor, my darling, wonderful wife," he said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "You have made me the happiest man who ever lived. Are you not concerned about my age? The risks? We will face whatever comes together as we always have," William said firmly. "But Eleanor, this is a miracle, a gift I never dared hope for." As the pregnancy progressed, Eleanor found herself amazed by how different this experience was from her previous attempts at motherhood. With her first husband, pregnancy had been seen as her primary duty, and the pressure to produce an heir had been enormous. With her second husband, her inability to carry children to term had been treated as a personal failure that reflected poorly on them both. But William treated her pregnancy as a joyous adventure they were sharing together. He read every book on childbearing he could find, consulted with the finest physicians, and fussed over Eleanor's health with an attention that was both touching and occasionally overwhelming. More importantly, he made it clear that while he was thrilled about the baby, their marriage did not depend on her ability to produce children. "I married you for you, Eleanor," he reminded her one evening when she worried aloud about what would happen if she lost the baby. "A child will be a wonderful addition to our family, but you are already everything I need." The pregnancy was not easy. Eleanor's age made her more tired than she had expected, and she suffered from persistent nausea that lasted well beyond the usual few months. There were days when she felt too ill to help with estate management, and she worried that she was failing in her duties as William's partner. But William adapted seamlessly, taking on more responsibility while insisting that Eleanor rest as much as she needed. He brought her tea and toast in bed on mornings when she felt too sick to rise early, and he moved his desk into their sitting room so he could work near her when she was confined to the couch. "You are not failing me," he told her firmly when she apologized for being unable to review the quarterly reports. "You are growing our child. That is far more important than any business matter." The months passed slowly but steadily. Eleanor's body changed in ways that alternately amazed and alarmed her. She had been pregnant twice before, but never successfully, and she had forgotten how completely pregnancy could transform a woman's body and mind. William seemed to find her changing form beautiful, often running his hands over her growing belly with wonder. "I cannot believe there is a person in there," he would say, "a little soul we created together." Eleanor's fears about the pregnancy began to ease as she passed milestone after milestone. When she felt the baby's first movements, she wept with joy. When the physician confirmed that the child seemed healthy and properly positioned, she dared to hope that this time might be different. The gossips, of course, had a field day with news of the pregnancy. Some claimed it proved that Eleanor had trapped William with feminine wiles. Others suggested the child could not possibly be his, given her age. Still others predicted dire consequences for both mother and child. Eleanor tried to ignore the whispers, but they stung nonetheless. "What if they are right?" she asked William one night after a particularly vicious piece of gossip reached their ears. "What if I am too old for this? What if something goes wrong? Then we will face it together," William said, as he always did. "But Eleanor, you are strong and healthy. The physician says you are progressing normally. We must have faith." Faith. It was something Eleanor had been in short supply of for most of her adult life, but as the pregnancy continued and her body proved capable of sustaining new life, she began to believe that perhaps this time things might work out differently. Winter arrived with unusual severity, and Eleanor found herself largely confined to the castle as her pregnancy advanced. She was now 7 months along, and her body had grown heavy and awkward. Simple tasks that had once been easy now required careful planning and frequent rest. But rather than feeling useless, Eleanor discovered that pregnancy had given her a new perspective on estate management. Thinking about the world she wanted to create for her child made her more invested than ever in the welfare of their tenants and the prosperity of their lands. She spent hours planning improvements to the tenant cottages, wanting to ensure that the children growing up on their estates had warm, dry homes. She worked with William to establish a school that would serve all the local children, regardless of their family's ability to pay. She organized a system for providing food and medical care to families in need. "You are nesting," William teased gently one evening as Eleanor outlined her plans for expanding the village church to accommodate more families. "But instead of preparing just our nursery, you want to improve the entire estate." Eleanor looked up from her papers, struck by the truth of his observation. "I suppose I am. I want our child to grow up in a place where people are cared for, where there is opportunity and hope." "Our child will be very fortunate to have you as a mother," William said, settling beside her and placing his hand on her rounded belly, "and so will all the other children who benefit from your plans." As Eleanor's due date approached, she found herself increasingly nervous about the birth itself. She had heard too many stories of women who died in childbed, particularly older women bearing their first living children. The thought of leaving William alone, of not being there to see their child grow up, filled her with dread. William seemed to sense her fears without her speaking them aloud. "Eleanor," he said, one evening as they sat by the fire in their chamber, "I want you to know that whatever happens, these months have been the most precious of my life. You have given me more happiness than I ever thought possible." Eleanor felt tears well up in her eyes. "Do not speak as if I am dying, William. I am simply having a baby. I know you are strong and brave, my love, but I also know you are frightened, and I wanted you to know how much you mean to me. How grateful I am for every day we have had together." Eleanor took his hand and placed it on her belly, where their child was moving restlessly. "Feel that? Our baby is strong and active. I can feel it in my bones, William. This child wants to be born. It wants to live and grow and become part of our family." William smiled, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then we must trust in that strength, both yours and the baby's." Eleanor's labor began on a cold February morning, 3 weeks before the physician had predicted. She woke to sharp pains in her back and belly, and she knew immediately that the time had come. William sent for the physician and the midwife, then refused to leave Eleanor's side, despite the women's protests that childbirth was no place for men. "This is my wife and my child," he said firmly. "I will not abandon them now." The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Eleanor had expected pain, but she had not anticipated the way it would consume her entire being, making it impossible to think of anything else. There were moments when she despaired, when she thought she could not continue, when she wondered if she would survive to see their child. But William never left her side, holding her hand through the worst contractions, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering words of encouragement and love. His presence gave her strength when her own seemed to fail. Finally, as dawn broke over the castle walls, their child made its entrance into the world with a lusty cry that brought tears of joy to everyone present. "A son," the midwife announced, placing the tiny red-faced baby on Eleanor's chest. "A healthy, perfect son." Eleanor looked down at the small face, already so dear to her, and felt a love more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. This was her child, hers and William's, the product of their unexpected but deep love. William leaned over them both, his face wet with tears. "He is beautiful, Eleanor. Perfect. Thank you, my darling wife. Thank you for this incredible gift." Their son, whom they named James Edward after both their fathers, proved to be a healthy, robust baby who thrived from his first day of life. Eleanor, despite her fears about her age, recovered quickly from the birth and found herself energized by motherhood in ways she had never expected. Nursing little James in the early morning hours, Eleanor would often reflect on the strange turns her life had taken. A year ago, she had been a childless widow resigned to a lonely old age. Now she was the wife of a man who truly loved her and the mother of a son she adored beyond measure. William proved to be a devoted father, spending hours simply watching the baby sleep or holding him while Eleanor rested. "I cannot believe he is ours," he would say over and over, marveling at tiny fingers and toes. The estate staff and tenants celebrated James's birth with genuine joy. Here was proof that the unusual match between the young Earl and his older bride had been blessed, that their love had produced new life to carry on the family line. Even the gossips seemed somewhat subdued by the reality of a healthy child. It was hard to maintain that Eleanor had somehow tricked William into marriage when the evidence of their genuine affection was so clear to anyone who saw them together. As spring arrived and James grew from a tiny infant into a more alert baby, Eleanor found herself settling into a happiness she had never dared dream possible. She had a husband who valued her as a true partner, a son who filled her heart with joy, and a life that felt meaningful and rich. One evening, as they sat in their private sitting room with James sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, William looked up from the book he was reading to Eleanor. "Do you remember that first day in the library when I told you I needed a partner more than a pretty ornament?" Eleanor smiled, setting down her embroidery. "I remember thinking you were either very wise or completely mad to choose me over all those beautiful young women. And now, what do you think now?" Eleanor considered the question seriously. "Now I think we were both wise enough to recognize something real when we found it. I think we were brave enough to choose love over convention, substance over surface." William rose and moved to sit beside her on the small sofa, taking her hand in his. "I told you once that I would choose you over 1,000 maidens. That is even more true now than it was then. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted: love, partnership, purpose, and now our son. I am the most fortunate man who ever lived." Eleanor looked at their sleeping child, then at her husband's dear face, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "We both are fortunate, William. We found each other when neither of us was looking for love. We built something beautiful together despite all the reasons it should not have worked." As if sensing their attention, baby James stirred in his cradle and made the small sounds that meant he would soon be hungry. Eleanor rose to go to him, but William caught her hand. "I love you, Eleanor, not for what you have given me, but for who you are. I want you to never doubt that again." Eleanor leaned down to kiss her husband, tasting the sweetness of complete trust and acceptance. "I love you too, William, more than I ever thought possible." As she lifted their son from his cradle and settled into the rocking chair to nurse him, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been 40 and childless when William chose her over 1,000 maidens, seeing in her not what she lacked but what she possessed: wisdom, strength, and the capacity for deep love. Their unconventional romance had become a marriage of true partnership, weathering gossip and legal challenges to emerge stronger than ever. And now, holding their miracle child while her beloved husband read aloud from a book of poetry, Eleanor knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories were the ones no one expected. She had thought her life was ending when she arrived at Ravenshollow Castle that day over a year ago. Instead, it had been just beginning. At 41, she had found the love of her life, become a mother, and discovered that it was never too late for dreams to come true. Outside their window, the gardens of Ravenshollow bloomed with the promise of spring, and inside their warm chamber, a family built on unexpected love continued to grow stronger with each passing day. Eleanor smiled as she watched William's face in the firelight, still marveling that this wonderful man had chosen her, and she knew that their love story was just beginning. The gossips would always whisper about the Earl, who chose a woman of 40 over younger beauties. But Eleanor no longer cared what they said. She had learned that true love was not about meeting society's expectations, but about finding someone who saw your worth when others saw only your flaws. She had learned that it was never too late for happiness, never too late for dreams to come true. As baby James fell asleep in her arms, and William continued reading in his warm voice, Eleanor closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the unexpected blessings that had transformed her life. She was 41, a mother at last, and deeply loved by a man who had seen past her age to the woman she truly was. It was, she thought drowsily, the most beautiful ending to a story that had once seemed destined for loneliness and regret. But perhaps it was not an ending at all, but rather the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life.